When flying in clear skies under visual flight rules, a pilot's spatial awareness is anchored entirely outside the window. They establish the pitch and bank angle of the aircraft by continually referencing the external natural horizon. But the moment an aircraft enters instrument meteorological conditions, that primary reference vanishes. Swallowed completely, the pilot is stripped of all external visual data. Without a visible horizon, human physiology fails. The inner ear actively misinterprets the forces of acceleration and gravity, feeding the brain false signals. Relying on physical sensations in this environment guarantees rapid spatial disorientation. To survive, the pilot must learn to ignore their own vestibular system and reconstruct the exact physical performance of the aircraft purely by reading the instruments inside the cockpit. Maintaining controlled flight in the clouds relies on three precise mechanical skills: cross-checking the instruments efficiently, interpreting the data, and executing accurate physical control. Achieving this requires dividing the cockpit into two functional categories: control and performance. These distinct halves are continuously bridged by a rigid visual algorithm known as the basic T. Adhering to this structured framework is the only reliable method to process the relentless stream of cockpit data, keeping the pilot mentally ahead of the airplane and preventing fatal task saturation. Every maneuver an aircraft executes is dictated by a specific physical equation: pitch attitude plus power equals performance. Inside the cockpit, the pilot manages this equation starting with the control instruments. The attitude indicator and the power gauge represent the immediate physical inputs the pilot selects using the control column and the throttle. Surrounding these primary inputs are the performance instruments: the altimeter, airspeed indicator, vertical speed indicator, and heading indicator. These dials do not change the state of the aircraft. They exist entirely to verify the aerodynamic results of the inputs the pilot just made on the control instruments. Separating the panel into these specific categories prevents pilots from making the dangerous error of chasing the needles. The procedure is absolute. Select the pitch and bank first on the control instruments, wait for the aircraft to react, and then consult the performance instruments to verify the result. At the center of this execution is the attitude indicator, the undisputed master instrument of the cockpit. Because it acts as an immediate, artificial representation of the natural horizon, the pilot must return their eyes to it every few seconds to maintain basic spatial awareness. However, staring exclusively at the attitude indicator will eventually allow uncorrected altitude and heading drifts. Conversely, looking randomly across the other gauges destroys the pilot's frame of reference. The solution is a disciplined visual routine known as the selective radial scan. The rule is strict. After checking any individual performance instrument, the pilot's eyes must immediately snap back to the master instrument. Scanning directly from the altimeter over to the airspeed indicator bypasses the artificial horizon. Because performance instruments have slight mechanical delays and display completely separate metrics, moving between them without resetting at the center breaks the pilot's spatial model. The selective radial scan continually re-anchors the pilot. It ensures a constant, reliable baseline of pitch and bank while allowing systematic, rapid sampling of the specific data required to maintain the flight path. This scanning technique was built entirely around the physical six-pack arrangement of traditional analog flight instruments. This specific cluster of gauges was meticulously engineered. The physical layout minimizes eye movement and maximizes the geometric efficiency of the radial scan. It forms the basic T configuration: airspeed at the top left, the attitude indicator top center, the altimeter top right, and the heading indicator directly below the attitude. Decades later, aviation transitioned to the modern glass cockpit, consolidating this data onto a digital primary flight display. Instead of traditional round dials, the digital screen presents information using vertical tapes for airspeed on the left and altitude on the right. Despite the radical difference in presentation, the digital geometry maps perfectly over the analog six-pack. The relative positions remain identical, preserving the exact same basic T scanning pattern. The basic T has survived the transition to digital screens because it reflects the optimal mechanical path for human visual processing in the cockpit. While the geographic layout of the basic T is permanent, the pilot's attention is constantly reallocated. The visual scan dynamically shifts priority based on whether the aircraft is climbing, cruising, or turning. During any given maneuver, one specific dial becomes the primary performance guide, the exact instrument that dictates the pilot's next physical control input. Consider the climb. With the throttle locked at maximum power, the airspeed indicator takes priority. It becomes the primary performance guide used to verify that the pitch attitude is correct. If the airspeed reads too low, the pilot makes a deliberate correction. Lower the nose on the attitude indicator, let the aircraft physically settle, and recheck the airspeed. Once the aircraft levels off into cruise flight, that priority hierarchy instantly shifts. Now, the altimeter takes over as the primary performance guide for pitch control, dictating minute adjustments to the nose to maintain level flight. The airspeed indicator is demoted, functioning solely to dictate adjustments to the throttle. By selectively reassigning importance to the instruments based on the immediate flight profile, the pilot filters out unnecessary data, ensuring they are only reacting to the exact metric that matters at that moment. This entire methodology culminates in the continuous execution of straight and level flight inside a cloud. The pilot is locked in a tight, mechanical feedback loop. Execute a control input, run the radial scan, verify the aerodynamic performance, and make the next micro-adjustment. Verify the attitude in the center, drop down to check the heading, correct the wings, snap back to the center, dart over to the altimeter, correct the pitch, back to the center, check the airspeed, adjust the power. This disciplined, rhythmic sampling of data prevents the pilot from falling behind the aircraft. By executing the basic T efficiently, raw numerical outputs are continuously translated into a perfect spatial model, allowing an aircraft to navigate safely through zero visibility.